Bam. We're with the spaceman himself. Yoni, how are you?
Good to be here.
He's even got
I'm
the stars and look, Lauren, the stars are all there.
very well. Yes,
How
they
you
are.
doing, mate? How was your Riga come down?
I had some post-conference depression. Uh,
It's real, right?
yeah, it is
we joke
real. It is
about
real.
it, but
Because it's yeah.
I've thought about this before. Um, what's worse, the FOMO or the come down? You know, the FOMO of the conference that you've not been able to get to for whatever reason, you can't make it. And Twitter starts lighting up with people at the airport bumping into other plebs, hanging out pre-conference vibes or hitting a side event. The FOMO is awful. But when you're there and you're enjoying all of that, the come down afterwards can be just as bad.
I agree, but the FOMO is definitely worse. It's
Okay.
like um, having loved and lost as opposed to never having loved at all. I mean, you get the conference and there's so much value in being there, so you sort of take the dump afterwards. Like the come down is yeah, it's something, but it's very valuable that we can have these kind of conversations in the spaces in between when we cosplay our small Bitcoin citadels at conferences.
Cosplay our small. I love it.
And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're not just showing on paper that Bitcoin is superior money, that is the best form of money that has ever existed. We are showing it in practice as well by actually using it. I mean, make no mistake, Bitcoin works and it's here. We have Bitcoin was financialized back in like 2016, 2017, 2018. And now it's the globalization of Bitcoin is ongoing. And we are sort of cosplaying Bitcoin citadels as we view Bitcoin values. So we have our own Bitcoin values, we have our own Bitcoin culture, and we have our own money. And so that's what we're doing. We're building small cities when we have conferences, and it's kind of like Burning Man, you know. Burning Man doesn't exist when it's not built, but it exists in the ether. Like it exists just as an idea, and so does every Bitcoin citadel. They exist as ideas, and then we build these conferences. They pop up every here and then, like every here and there, like mushrooms, and we get to actually live it. We get to actually live the ideas that we have about Bitcoin. And so yeah, and it's the same thing with Burning Man. Burning Man is undergoing a constant has undergone a constant evolution since its inception in 1986, I think. It's for those who don't know, Burning Man is a festival in the Nevada desert, where they build a city called Black Rock City, and they build it and they have it for 9 days, and it's not built on the same principles as our societies. They have other vastly different principles. And from year to year, Burning Man undergoes an evolution. It grows, it changes. And so it's the same with our conferences.
Lauren, there was so much in there. Do you have a question to ask Yoni?
Um, I have a different question.
Okay, go on.
What made you want to write a book?
Oh, nice one.
That's a great question. Lauren, first of all, it was yeah,
This
there it
book,
is.
no less,
Yeah,
which
there it
for
is.
those watching on YouTube, look at it. What a beautiful cover.
It is, isn't it? I'm very happy with it. Laura, first of all, it was great meeting you in was it yeah, it was Riga.
Yeah, I
Not Prague.
And, and Prague. Were you at
And Prague. Yeah, we met
yeah,
there as well.
yeah,
Did we? Yeah.
because they
No,
all mold
I'm not
into
sure.
one too, these
Right.
conferences.
Yeah, they all do. That was great meeting you. I was very impressed by all of you. So it was fun meeting you. Yeah, what made me want to write the book? Look, the thing with abundance through scarcity is that I never really I started writing about Bitcoin back in 2016 just for my own sake, to learn, to understand. And then eventually I realized that I had a bunch of content written down, and I started making videos. And I continued to write, and and after some time, I just had a few articles that I thought about maybe I should try to publish these. And then I found like a narrative that I could use to actually make. I was considering writing a fictional novel, a technical book, an economics book, but then I just came to my senses and realized that just continue doing what you do best, and that is just combine like science with poetry. And that is what I wanted to do. And Bitcoin is the perfect platform for the intersection of poetry and science. And I wanted to explore that part of the rabbit hole, that path of the rabbit hole. So I began writing sort of poetic scientific pieces about Bitcoin. And eventually I just had enough material that I decided to make it a book. And eventually it just, abundance through scarcity just came out of it. So I never really decided to write the book. It just happened organically. And for that reason, it was a very messy process that took a long time. Now that I've recently begun, I'm just beginning now actually to write my second book. And now I'm starting with the end in mind, and I've been through the process once, and so it's so much easier now.
You have a working
even if the topic is a lot more difficult.
Do you have a working title for it?
Not really. I'm considering. I have a few. One that I'm considering is Bitcoin, Earth, and Space. Another one I'm considering is hyperconnectivity.
Oh, I like
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that brings us back to the conferences and cosplaying, because that is what happens. It probably sounds very woo-woo to people that have not been to a conference, to a Bitcoin conference. I mean, forget, like, you've probably been to an industry conference in whatever sector you're at. It's fucking shit, right? Nobody likes it. It's just boring. And it's the horrible networking, cocktail nights, vying for attention, trying to get your product in front of the right person at the right time, and manning a booth, and just, it's the worst, the absolute worst. You go to a Bitcoin conference and, oh my goodness, like you've never felt hyperconnectivity is the perfect word for it. You've never
You know what I
felt it
would,
before.
right? And I think what you're getting at is actually like a real human connection, because that is what we're getting at Bitcoin conferences. Because a lot of Bitcoiners are they're on a spiritual journey. They are enlightened people, and they are people that have the capacity, the capability to actually make real human connections, which is something that we in the Western world have lost. Like, there are people who have never had a real connection with themselves, with other people, with nature, with cosmos, and they have no idea what connection even is. But there are so many people that are present. They're present, they are enlightened, they are awake. And for that reason, you can really make a real human connection with a lot of Bitcoiners. And that is a big reason why I just love going to conferences, because I know that I will have quite a few very real conversations and connect with people. I remember I had at least 5 or 10 life-changing conversations in Riga. I work as when I mine fiat, I work as a medical doctor, and And as a medical doctor, I have the privilege of sitting down with a lot of people and having real conversations about things that really matter to them. And so you get to have these connections with them in a way. But a lot of the people that I meet in my work, they are not awake, they are not present, they are not enlightened. So when I actually get to meet Bitcoiners instead, people who are on a similar journey as I am, and they are present, they are enlightened, and they are awake, you can have that real connection. And there is no better medicine in a world that is deprived of connection to actually experience that. And that gives you a sort of high even. And I think that is where the calm down stems from after conferences as well.
The post-conference come down, the PCCD.
Yeah.
That is what we need to. But this is this is like one of the main reasons. So selfishly, I want to come to the conferences for that, for myself. But I always try and bring as many family members as I can. So that's why I love bringing my wife and my kids along. And I urge any plebs out there listening to do the same thing. I know it's expensive, and I really hope that the prices of these conferences start coming down.
They will. Eventually, they have to. They will.
Because right now, that barrier to entry is too high.
But I mean, there are going to be expensive conferences. There always are. But there are going to be a lot of conferences that are going to be cheaper as well. And the infrastructure is expanding. It's growing. We're going to have
now.
more.
Sophia she's working on Bitcoin Kids conference ideas, and she's plugging into Bitcoin Atlantis. So there's going to be a whole kids area there, the educational area, and even a stage for kids to host panels. Big names as well. So for anybody listening, I'm hoping that one's going to be more affordable for people. I know still people have to take the time off work, buy the plane tickets, get the accommodation. It's still a big ask, but if you can make that a family holiday and plug into a Bitcoin conference at the same time, this could be family changing stuff, because I know a lot of plebs out there struggle with loneliness and being the only one in the household that, has this crazy hobby in the eyes of wife and kids. And you've gone all a little bit crazy. But before we get deeper into that, how do you feel, Lauren, when you go to the conferences and you meet, because you're generally the only kids there? We met Ishan, obviously, in Riga. There were no other kids in Biarritz this year, I don't think.
No kids.
We did Bitcoin Adventure Weekend in.
It was full of kids, but
that was great.
Tiny kids, so.
There were some really tiny kids. That was great to see, like between 2 and 5. But then there were some teenagers, and there was some your age as well. And you all did the Roger 9000's chocolate.
I did it.
Roger 9000 chocolate making ceremony, and
that was great.
More of that stuff. But when you, like, for Riga, for example, how do you feel as a kid, as a 12-year-old, going to these things, hanging out with adults all day? Like, what kind of feedback do you get, like, emotionally?
I think it's fun.
Right.
Fun, especially with the people that you've seen a lot, like Eric, Izzy, other people like that.
Or Canute as well.
Canute too. Oh, Canute.
Yeah.
Gets us lost every single time.
Yeah.
No, Daniel, when you told me about the idea of just having a kids section at a conference and sort of expanding the infrastructure in that way, it gave me goosebumps. Like, obviously we have to do this. Obviously we have to make it a thing for families and kids as well. Why has nobody done this before? I think the reason is because we are at that moment now, that we are just now ready for it. And I would just love to see that, having families come over. Like, it's the same thing as with the have you guys seen Oppenheimer yet?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like, if they were going to get the best scientists into Los Alamos. They had to build churches. They had to bring the entire families, or let the scientists bring their families. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. We need to make this fun for entire families. We need to make it valuable for entire families to come along.
And I don't want to put words in Knut's mouth here, but this was the first time I believe he traveled to a conference with his wife. Kids were with grandparents and, you know, having a great time in Sweden. But his wife, Sophia, came along, and I know she had a great time. And she got to see, actually, you know, maybe he's not as crazy as all hell. And perhaps
No,
there is something
he is that
here.
crazy. He's exactly that crazy.
Yeah.
But yes, it was. I think Sophia really had a great time. I spent a lot of time with them, and it was a lot of fun.
Imagine saying to your wife, "We're going on vacation to a Bitcoin conference."
Right?
Yeah, well,
Who wouldn't be excited?
mummy hears that all the time, and she rolls her eyes. But when she's in there, and she's like, and then hanging out with Ricky and Laura, you know, the Bitcoin Italian explorers, having fun, and just finding themselves in, like, out of nowhere.
Right.
You're 5 minutes into one of the deepest conversations you've ever had in your life with another human being who you've just met.
Right. Right. So I'm curious, as a 12-year-old, what would you like to see at a conference? What would make it more fun for you?
I've been trying to think for a long time because my dad's like, "Oh, what would you want?" And then my brother says games, but I'm just like, is that seriously what we just want in the Bitcoin conference? I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Because yeah, it's easy to go to, yeah, give us like an arcade hall of a load of fun games and let us pay with lightning and all that. But after an hour or two, you'd probably be bored of that. And there's a certain amount of intellectual stimulation that you're going to want on, you know, an emotional level rather than just staring into an arcade machine, right? And having conversations. This is what Sophia, she joined the Bitcoin ATLANTIS call the other day and pitched the idea. She had a deck of, right, here's an idea for a panel, and explain Bitcoin to me like I'm a 12-year-old. And the panel is hosted by Sam Duvall, and the panelists are Jack Mallers and Giacomo Zucco. Right, let's go. And now let's have another panel. Let's have a presentation from a kid, you know, talking about Bitcoin and why it's important for savings. And then let's get Rob Brinded up there talking about the hamster wheel and how your mind works and how, you know, you can step off that and rescue yourself from anxiety and depression. And so that's what she's thinking. That's what's going through a 16-year-old's head. So yeah, I'm bullish, mate. I'm bullish for.
I would love to see Bitcoin conferences like the organizers embrace some of the principles behind Burning Man. So one thing that is one core principle of Burning Man is that everybody contributes. So we could probably see like different ticket prices for people who actually want to contribute in some way. Say set up an arcade, or like people who actually want to attend the conference, but they also want to bring food courts. So sort of grow the Citadel to become more like a small town by way of having people there who actually contribute other types of services. And I mean, the core thing here is to produce a pure and a signal, a Bitcoin signal.
Yeah,
that is ultimately what we want to do. But I think that we could like expand these conferences quite a bit. Yeah,
for sure. We're still so early in
we are.
In this journey. Right, Lauren, what do you want to say goodbye before we get into the next hour of geeking out about?
Anyways, thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Good to see you.
Take this empty glass with you and bring it back full.
Yeah. So are we early, Princey?
Now,
I mean, it's not even a question. like like imagine imagine you're born in Cairo in the year 2140, or in Austin, Texas in 2370, or in Tokyo in the year 3000. Do you think we'll have better money by then? No, we won't. Money is a fundamental technology. So it makes sense that it arises early in a civilization, right? And we are right now entering the digital age as a new digital civilization. And this is our money. Money arises early in a civilization, and we are on the cusp of morphing into a new kind of civilization.
I would say we're evolving as a species.
Yes, we are. Yeah, exactly.
It's not a revolution, it's
No.
an evolution. Our species is evolving onto digital scarcity, and that blows my mind. Increasing digital scarcity, which
Right.
which in your book you go into like some cosmic ideas, and it's great reading. I love it. But and just to touch on like what's his name, Yuval Noah Harari,
Yeah.
how he talks about money being an hallucination, and how a lot of people fall for that narrative because the US dollar, it is a hallucination. It's backed by nothing, and we all know that. But at the end, what what the anthropologist Harari is missing is our species evolved when they discovered a medium of exchange. We evolved from barbarism to civilization. That was a key moment in the evolution of our species, which he still says, oh, it's all an illusion, and eat the bugs and be happy because I'm the lapdog of Klaus anyway. And it's just so freaking annoying that he's managed to pull the wool over so many people's eyes and when you're trying to explain Bitcoin to people and how we view it as an evolution, like now, like oh man, it's so humbling to come to that realization and realize what you're a part of, and at the same time so frustrating that you can't wake as many other people up as you'd like to, as you're on your own journey there.
Every paradigm shift has taken time. When future anthropologists look back at this time, it's going to seem like a very quick shift from our industrial era to our digital era. But ultimately, money has always been a ledger. That's what it is. I'm willing to give Harari the benefit of the doubt, and just maybe he means something that is not coming through when he says that money is an hallucination. I sort of get his point of view. I'm not saying he's right in arguing that money is a collective hallucination. It really isn't. It's a ledger, and it's a very real thing that we've used in a variety of forms since we were hunter gatherers. As I said, money evolves early in civilization because it's a fundamental technology that we use. We need it to coordinate our workforces and our resources. Without money, it's very difficult to progress socially, technologically, and economically as a society. So we need money. It's a fundamental tool. But yeah, it's a ultimately it's a ledger. That's what it is.
Well, future anthropologists looking back on this time, it's funny. I was talking with Izzy about this exact thing this morning, and here we are talking about it again. They'll be able to look back and listen to conversations like this.
Yes.
Could you imagine being able to do that, like when they were on the verge of discovering a medium of exchange, and being
The
part
difference
of...
here
Well
the,
done.
the, the
Thank you.
difference here is that this is now onto the digital age.
Sorry, I just got dropped out there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I was saying, imagine being able to, listen back into
Yeah,
to those
yeah,
conversations
yeah.
around the campfire under the stars when they were all kind of figuring out, hang on, this
I
is
was saying that I was saying to that in response to that, I think that this is the first time in human history that we're actually approaching this intellectually. When we were in our previous paradigm shifts, when we went from hunter-gatherers to farmers and from farmers to industrialists and now into the digital age, previously we haven't intellectualized the shift as we are now, because these shifts have occurred over such long periods of time. Like the shift from hunter-gatherers to farm to settling and becoming farmers, that was 5,000 years. And nobody really knew that they were in a transitional phase. And going from farmers to industrialists, that was a shift that took about 300 years. And this is happening a lot faster. And having our history, we can extrapolate into the future and realize that we are a species that is constantly evolving, and we are constantly undergoing paradigm shifts. And this is the one that we're currently heading toward. It's very, very difficult to see what is going to happen after that. But we are, like, there are several ways to measure our current progress. And I think that one very significant one, if we zoom out, is just looking at where we stand on the Kardashev scale. I think that is probably.
Do you want to get into that?
Oh,
Like
sure,
what
absolutely.
scale that is?
Sure, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, most people have heard about this Kardashev scale by now, but for those of you who don't know, the Kardashev scale is measurement of the technological sophistication of a civilization based on how much energy they produce and consume. It was proposed by Russian astrophysicist Nikolai Kardashev in the 1960s. And he proposed a three-tiered system where Kardashev type 1, Kardashev type 2, Kardashev type 3 civilizations. And a type 1 civilization is a civilization that controls 100% of the energy available on their planet. So that means that they are fully planetary. They can harness 100% of the energy from their host star. They can harness all of the energy from their tectonic plate movements. And they control their planet. They control the weather. They control the orbit of the planet, and so they're fully planetary. Type 2 civilizations, they are stellar. They control 100% of the energy within their solar system. In other words, they control 100% of the energy of their stars. So these types of civilization have constructed megastructures like Dyson spheres or Dyson swarms, which are these hypothetical megastructures surrounding the host star, in a way that civilization would live on that structure surrounding the star. It would be a gigantic megastructure with that could host trillions and trillions and trillions of people, and it would extend far out into the solar system as well. And then there are type 3 civilizations, and these are galactic. These beings, these entities, they play with quasars and construct black holes. They control 100% of the energy within an entire galaxy. So that would be us controlling 100% of the energy in the Milky Way galaxy. We would have colonized virtually every solar system, built Dyson swarms or Dyson spheres around every star in the entire galaxy. So it's inconceivable to, I mean, it's difficult to even imagine what these kind of entities would be. They would be gods in our eyes. So that's the original three-tiered system of the Kardashev scale. Then Carl Sagan extrapolated that, or he made some extra additional work on it to also place us on that scale. He also conceived of a type 4, type 5, and type 6 type of civilization, where a type 4 would be one that controls the entire universe, and a type 5 would be one that controls the multiverse, and a type 6 would be one that controls like the entirety of all that is. And Carl Sagan puts us at a 0.6 by measuring how much energy that we actually control now. So that's 0.4 points from being a type 1 civilization, but we have to note that this scale is logarithmic. That means that we have to increase our energy output by 10,000 fold to become a type 1 civilization.
Net zero.
We are type 0 now.
No, net zero. Like
net zero.
We've got to harness all this energy, but at the same time stay net zero.
All
and
right.
eat the bugs and stay happy. Right?
Exactly. No, but it's actually conceivable if we have if we are going into like a prolonged era of difficult natural catastrophes. I think that we are going to devote more and more of our GDP to actually staying comfortable. That might be a real scenario for the future. I have no idea where this is going. No one knows. But if we look at the projections, it's not looking very good. So, but the solution is that, well, we are very, very adaptable as a species. And we also might have to allocate more resources into like just protecting ourselves against the environment. That might be a future that we're going into. But I think that is a good problem to have, because as you said, Daniel, we are a species that is evolving, and our next big leap as a species is to become planetary. And we don't really have a lot, like, to become a Kardashev type 1 civilization. In order to be able to do that, we have to first of all develop technologies that are type 1 technologies, and we, as I see it, only have two. We have the internet, which is a Kardashev type 1 technology for information, and we have Bitcoin, which is Kardashev type 1 money. Those are the two technologies that we have that are aligned with being a Kardashev type 1 civilization. But we also need to be politically capable of handling type 1 problems. We need to be able to, on a global scale, be aligned on what we want to do with threats from outer space, pandemics, climate catastrophes, and so on, ecological collapses. We need to be able to cooperate as an entire planet, and we have no ways of cooperating as a species on a global scale. But that we must resolve in order to become a type 1 civilization. It's not enough to have type 1 technologies. Let's say that we find a way to harness 100% of the energy that reaches us and control tectonic plate movements and even control our orbit. If we cannot work together as a species on a global scale, we are not going to become a Kardashev type 1 civilization. And I think for us to become a Cartesian type 1 civilization, we also need a spiritual awakening on a global scale. And we are actually approaching that, I think, becoming a spiritually enlightened species on a global scale. One technology that speeds that process along is the rise of use of psychedelics. We are currently we're not undergoing just an economic renaissance. We're also undergoing a renaissance of spirituality, of psychedelics, and that is very significant for our future as a species, because we have been using psychedelics since before we were Homo sapiens. We have evolved with them. We have co-evolved with this technology. And to think that they are merely drugs that people use to party, that is grossly underestimating what this technology is. It is nature's memory. It is who we are as a species. There has not been a time or place in the history of our species where we have not been using psychedelics, except for now. And I think that, again, future anthropologists are going to look back at this era and look at it as the big prohibition, the greatest prohibition that ever existed. How we could deny ourselves this technology, this medicine.
Where did this great prohibition start? Who was behind this?
The same precedent that took us off the gold standard. So if there's one precedent that we should consider putting in the horror cabinet of political history, it's Nixon. He saw that prior to his reign, we were using psychedelics in the West. In the 40s and 50s and 60s, we used them for research to explore the mind and research the brain, but also in psychiatry to treat mental illnesses quite successfully. Then in the 60s, they began to leak into society, and they became synonymous with counterculture. And these are very potent substances. So when people began to use them out in society, a lot of people started to realize that the path that Western society was on was misaligned. It wasn't necessarily the greatest thing for human civilization. So people began to organize differently, and this was a direct threat against existing power structures. And this Nixon noticed this as young men no longer wanted to fight for their country. They didn't want to go into the Vietnam War. And he considered this to be one of the greatest threats against the West, that young men no longer wanted to fight for their country. So he banned psychedelics from one day to the other, and all research had to stop. So that is it's sad, really. It's sad because we have missed out on decades of research. But then in the 80s, it started to search quite a little bit, at least, and now it's coming on like a freight train, and it's moving probably faster than it's healthy. We are, but the thing is, now this time around, we have a history, and we are ready in a way that we haven't been before. We are going to stumble quite a bit. There are going to be a lot of people in the seeking emergency medical care because they are experiencing things that they didn't know that they could experience, and they are horrified by it. And we're going to see more people choose paths in life that are very non-traditional.
All right, let's. This is so interesting because I got into this a little bit with Eric Kaysen. For those listeners that want to go back and listen to that, and we'll touch on some of the same stuff here. But what's interesting to me is you said, I don't know, about 45 minutes ago, you mind fear as a medical doctor. So let's and but at the same time here you're talking about psychedelics. So I want to take people down your thought processes. And so as a medical doctor, you're most likely surrounded by conventional thinking, brainwashing through the medical educational system that was set up by, we all know who, to push allopathic drugs into the society and keep people, just sick enough for them to keep coming back for those drugs. But you see the other side, completely the other side. So, wow, man. I mean, are you living? So, what your day-to-day work? What does that look like? You're a medical doctor in what capacity? You're a general practitioner, a surgeon. What flavor of medical doctor are you? And are you kind of like knocking up against this allopathic, pharmaceutical-driven, monopolistic, horrific world, and at the same time thinking, I've got to get out of this? Where's your mind at with all of that? Give us that little insight.
Thank you for that question. That's great. Yeah, so I am a general practitioner. I'm specializing as a general practitioner, and I'm finished in about 6 months. It's a common misconception that people in general medicine, general practitioners, are not specializing, but we specialize as long and as much as surgeons or pediatricians and so on. It's a brand of medicine. It's a branch of medicine.
It sounds oxymoronic, doesn't it? A
Yeah, it does.
specialized general
Yeah,
practitioner.
it sounds oxymoronic, and it's the name is unfortunate, but it's a branch of medicine. We just have an unfortunate choice of name for primary care specialist would be better. So I think that I see where you're coming from with the assumption that I would meet a lot of people who are having more a traditional way of thinking. But I see this is changing. I can see that a lot of people in society who are not working as in medicine in any capacity have a slightly outdated view on how doctors think nowadays. And because people are very open to psychedelics, doctors are very open, and I am completely transparent with everyone that I am a proponent for psychedelics, that I use psychedelics myself, and I talk to my patients about psychedelics as well. Where I see psychedelics having the best use case in medicine at this point in time is palliative care, so end of life care, because it is known that people who are approaching death, they struggle with quite a few things. They struggle with anxiety, they struggle with pain, they struggle with existential questions, they struggle with nausea, they struggle with constipation, they struggle with a bunch of things. And we have solutions to quite a few of those problems, but we don't have good solutions to the existential questions and the existential angst. But actually we do, because if we can just administer under careful guidance, a dose of a psychedelic like psilocybin, which is the active psychedelic compound found in psychedelic mushrooms, we know that these people can have an experience where they go into the psychedelic realm and see things that they didn't know that they could see. They can have experiences that they didn't know that a human being could have. And when they come out of that experience, they say oftentimes that it was the most significant experience of their entire lives. And these are people in their 80s who have had kids, grandkids, who traveled the world, who've done a lot of crazy stuff. And they say that this is the most significant experience of their entire lives. And they are no longer afraid of death. The thing with going into the psychedelic realm is that you enter a place where you're no longer confined to your biological body. We are confined to our biological aperture as human beings. We perceive the world through our senses, through our brains, our eyes, our skin, our bodies. But when you go into that place, your body dissolves and you are there as a spirit, rather as pure consciousness, and you don't have a body. You don't see, you don't hear, you don't feel, you don't really think either. And it is beyond 3 dimensions. It is beyond language. And for this reason, when people come back, there's just no way of describing it, because it is beyond the physical world. It is beyond language. So there's nothing that we can say to describe it. People can only see it for themselves. But when we go there, the overwhelming sense is that we are in the presence of the source of everything. And some people call that God. And that can be a terrifying experience to actually meet God. But when people come back, they are often changed. Even if they go back into their human bodies, they sort of realize that the most spiritual thing that we can do are to honor this human experience, because we are here not just as human beings. We're here as spirits having a human experience. And I know that has become sort of a cliche, but it is the truth. When you go into the psychedelic experience, you see that we are so much more than human beings. But it is an honor to be a human being. It is such a fleeting thing. It's a fleeting moment of our entire existence that we get to be these biological beings and be here on planet Earth, this amazing planet, and have these amazing bodies and have this amazing human experience. And honoring that is the most spiritual thing we can do. We're here to learn things. I'm not sure what I'm here to do. I'm pretty sure I'm here to learn and to help others. And having been in the psychedelic realm, you sort of come back and realize that you don't have to take things so seriously. You're here because you want to be here. And everything is perfect just as it is. You're here for a fleeting moment. And so there's a stillness, a new type of calm. And there's no fear when it comes to death anymore. I mean, there's still a lot of sadness. There's still a lot of anxiety. Those things are part of the human experience. And you should honor them. You should look at them. You shouldn't avoid them. You should look at them. In the same way that you look at your breath when you meditate. You should look at every experience that you have. Be present in it. When you go through your everyday life, just observe the movie that is taking presence before your eyes. Just watch it and be present in the experience that you're having. And I mean, everything changes. Music changes. Your ability to connect with people changes. Your ability to connect with nature changes. But ultimately, there's only so much that you can change as a human being, because you're still confined to a society and your human body. But it's the changes at the spiritual level, and that is very intangible. It's difficult to explain what that is. I can say that I'm no longer afraid of death. Okay, so a lot of people are not afraid of death, because who was afraid of living in the 1600s? Nobody's afraid of that, because you don't exist. You don't have a conscious experience. So that's fine. But yeah, being a human being is one of the greatest things that there can possibly be. And we should really be present in this experience and make the most of it, not ignore it, not hide from it, not hide from the pain, not hide from the anxiety. Just observe it and be present in it, because it's beauty. And there is sadness. I mean, I'm very, very sad to having put my father in the ground. I'm very sad to see my mom and my stepdad age. I'm very sad to see things decay. But that is part of this experience, and we should embrace that as well. I mean, resistance doesn't really do a lot for us. It's the same thing when you go into the psychedelic experience. If you try to resist it, it's going to be painful for you. It's going to be one of the most horrendous experiences you have had in your entire life, beyond what you can imagine, probably. But yeah, you learn to be present, and that changes who you are. So and to go on another tangent, like for my forthcoming book, it's going to be a lot about Bitcoin and psychedelics, because I consider Bitcoin to be a psychedelic. It doesn't just have psychedelic effects, it is a psychedelic. It's not a chemical one, but it is a psychedelic. It has the same kind of transformative potential on the individual level and on societal level. Like, just to draw two very broad brushstrokes, Bitcoin, like psychedelics, expose flaws. They expose flaws. And when Bitcoin was introduced into the world, it began to immediately expose the flaws of the fiat system. It very clearly shows us what's wrong with the current economic system. We have a monetary system where you have to work for something that others can make for free. A monetary system that is closed and not neutral, where they use money that can be used to spy on you and to steal from you. And Bitcoin, by providing healthy money that cannot be corrupted to spy on you, that cannot be corrupted to steal from you, expose all of those flaws. Another parallel that is very essential is the idea of how Bitcoin, or how psychedelics create a hyperconnected mind. So when we use psychedelics, it temporarily restructures the brain. So a lot of people have seen this very famous image where there's placebo and then there's psilocybin, like two circles. I use this in my presentation as well. And it is a mathematical representation showing how different regions of the brain are connected. And in the placebo, you see a lot of lines going through the diagram showing how parts are connected. And in the psilocybin brain, it is this crazy, this wild symphony of connectivity. And what's going on here is that psilocybin unlocks doors between different regions of the brain that normally remain shut. And that lets the parts of the brain communicate that normally don't communicate. And that, for all intents and purposes, is an entirely new kind of a mental operating system. It gives you new mental capabilities. For example, vision and hearing normally don't communicate, but psilocybin changes this by forging new connections between vision and hearing, so that you can experience colors as sounds, so that you can hear colors. You can look at a Picasso painting and hear the symphony in a Picasso painting, and moreover, you can appreciate the melodies of a Mozart symphony as manifesting as vibrant and tangible forms in the space around you. And those are new mental capabilities that we humans are capable of having. And it shows us how limited we are due to how we function normally with our normal biological aperture. But by changing our mental operating system, we can add new capabilities to how we function. Another very significant mental upgrade that we get from the psychedelic state is that we are capable of having new kinds and deeper insights into whatever field that we're in. There are many significant breakthroughs that have taken place in philosophy, in art, and in science due to psychedelics. We have two of our possibly most famous and significant Nobel Prizes attributed to psychedelics. Those are in science, and the discovery of the molecular structure of the DNA molecule discovered by Watson and Crick. That is attributed to psychedelics. Another one is the PCR technology, polymerase chain technology, which is used to augment small amounts of DNA. So it's used in forensic science, and it's used in genetic testings and so on. It is incredibly important for modern medicine. And then, I mean, they have also inspired a lot of ideas in philosophy, ranging from the nature of the human condition, the nature of reality, to even an idea that is closely tied to psychedelics. Psychedelics is the idea of panpsychism. Are you aware? Do you know what panpsychism is?
No.
Okay, so panpsychism is this is very interesting. So the conventional idea of how consciousness emerges is through our biology, right? So it has a seat in our brain. Panpsychism is a different idea of how we become conscious, and it is an idea that is gaining a lot of traction in the scientific community and in medicine. And it is the idea that this is going to sound very sci-fi, so prepare, buckle up. So consciousness may be a fundamental property of the universe. It may not be something that is just in our brains. It may be a fundamental property of the universe. And here's an analogy to make this a lot clearer. If we through a sufficiently complex structure, we have managed to make use of other fundamental properties of the universe, like electromagnetic waves. We have managed, as biological beings, to make use of electromagnetism to produce vision. We have the eye in our brains, and with those organs, they are sufficiently complex structures enough to make use of electromagnetism to produce color, depth, shapes. But these things, colors, depth, shape, they don't exist in objective reality. Electromagnetism doesn't have colors, doesn't have shapes, doesn't have depth. These are things that are created by our brains. So our visual world is a simulation of objective reality. As we see the world, it does not exist. It is a simulation taking place entirely in our minds. That is where the world exists. The real world, so to say, is incomprehensible. It cannot be perceived because you need a tool to perceive it. You need something like the eye and the brain to perceive it. But as soon as you introduce a brain and a pair of eyes to comprehend the universe, you are distorting it. You are distorting it through the apparatus with which you perceive it. That is what we're doing. So we're producing a very useful simulation of reality so that we can orient, so we can procreate, so that we can survive. But here's the thing. it may be that consciousness is just another property of the universe that the brain receives, that through the brain we can filter this consciousness property of the universe to produce self-awareness. And like, this is gaining a lot of traction. It sounds quite sci-fi, and it's very it's very oppositional to the conventional view of what consciousness is. But we have to be humble in this and remind ourselves that we have had science for 300 years. We have no idea about what's out there in the universe. We have no idea how consciousness works. There's so much that we don't know. And I'm willing to entertain these ideas. For one thing, it makes life more interesting. And we have to ask these questions in order to progress scientifically and technologically. So the thing is, when we enter the psychedelic realm, we sort of see that there is some substance to this idea about panpsychism. Because when we go there, we see that we are, in fact, not separate. You and I, Daniel, we are not separate. We are one and the same. I am you, and you are me. We are the same. We have this illusion of being separate entities, beings, because we have these biological bodies. But it's like taking a glass and scoping up a piece of water from the ocean and saying, okay, so this is no longer the ocean. It is the ocean. It's just temporarily in a glass, but it is the ocean. And it's the same thing with consciousness. We are spirits. We are conscious beings that are just temporarily here on planet Earth for whatever reason, to learn a lesson or whatever. But we are ultimately one. And when you go into the psychedelic realm, you see that you experience oneness, probably for the first time in your life. And when you go into that experience, it is very, very difficult to roll your eyes at these ideas. So yeah, like, I would love to see a culture in the future, when we are ready for it, where we teach every 8-year-old to meditate, and where we have every 15-year-old go through a rite of passage using psychedelics to go into adulthood. It would change the world profoundly. And I cannot conceive of a world where we have that type of awakened culture, where we continue to fight wars, where we don't agree. And that is why I think that psychedelics is part of becoming a Kardashev type 1 civilization. We need psychedelics to actually understand that we are a global species. We are one. And when you go into the experience, it's you cannot escape that realization. Like, when you are in that place, when you're in the psychedelic realm, it's analogous to how you feel when you wake up from a dream. When you are in a dream, you don't really question the reality of the dream. You're just floating along. But when you wake up from it, you realize that, oh, that was just a dream. But that thought never occurred to you while you were dreaming, that, oh, this is just a dream. That is something that you realize when you wake up from the dream. And it is the very same thing when you go into the psychedelic realm. Then what you feel is that, oh, this was just a dream. This physical reality that we perceive as the one and true reality. You realize that this might be the dream, because when you're in that place, that feels like the real thing. That feels like when you're awake, that you're truly awake for the first time. And I believe it is because you go back to source, where you came from and where you're going back, where we all came from, where everything comes from, and where everything is going back to. And the thing is, like, when people have these experiences, when they have a breakthrough psychedelic experience, people will agree on these things. They will it is very difficult to, like, if you go into the jungle and do a ayahuasca, do that and then try to roll your eyes at these ideas. It's impossible. So that's a long
you
rant. I'm sorry.
no, I mean, you're blowing my mind. You're a
That's
better shill. You're a better shill for psychedelics than Kaysen. Sorry, Eric, but
actually Eric and I connected very well in Riga. I
I
think
bet.
it was the first time I met him, and I was aware of who he was, but I think he was surprised, or he laughed at how I introduced myself. I said to him, the first thing I said to him was, "I hear that you're awake," and he thought that was weird. But then we had, but he is awake. He is awake. He's been in these places. He understands these things, and yeah, he's a great guy. I'm very honored to have met him, and yeah, he's a great man.
I there's a few things I want to dig into here.
Go ahead.
Oh, so much. And yeah, okay. All right, let's go here then. With this knowledge, and with the obviously the work that you do day to day, it must have been a very difficult period for you to go through, like the COVID madness, where they were, to my understanding, misusing the PCR tests, which you referenced, and what was his name? Carrie Mullins, was that correct?
Who discovered PCR technology? Yes,
Yeah.
Hermos, yeah.
Who mysteriously died when he said, "This is, you guys are using like the wrong test. It wasn't designed for this. What are you doing?" And, we'll just let that one pass. So there you are. You're a medical doctor. They're using this test to come up with all of these data points, and then push the complete opposite to what you have just advocated. Psychedelics. They were pushing the complete opposite and using general practitioners around the world as their delivery mechanism, basically.
Yes. Yes.
What was going on in your mind here? And I know it was different in Sweden. They weren't, I don't think, as bad as some countries, but my goodness, this is, in my mind, it will probably go, again, future anthropologists will look at this last 2 or 3 years as the greatest crime against humanity.
Yes. And as you said, I live in Sweden, and to all of you listening out there who live in a country where the lockdowns were affecting you in a very severe way, and you suffered from this, I'm very sorry you had these experiences. I don't think that there were many doctors who sympathize with this. Here in Sweden, we didn't really notice it, to be honest. I was living my life as I and going to work and doing what I do every day. I hardly noticed the pandemic. I hardly noticed it. The biggest thing I noticed, you know what that is, Daniel? I noticed that I stopped getting colds. I didn't have a cold for the entire period of COVID because I think people started to wash their hands for once. So that's a good thing. But yeah, it's not an understatement to say that it was a crime against humanity, and I cannot possibly imagine how we could come to the conclusion that locking people up and pushing untested medicines on a global scale onto people, it's not a good thing. When it comes to the COVID vaccine, I know that there's a lot of contention there, especially from the Bitcoin community, because there's a lot of antagonism generally in the Bitcoin community, which I appreciate. Then we have to see that there are vaccines, and vaccines are, I cannot stress this enough, one of the most important medical technologies that we have invented, if not the most important medical technology that we have ever invented. You should get your vaccinations as a kid. And if you have an illness or if you get old, you should absolutely have your vaccinations. When it comes to the COVID vaccine, it is a slightly different thing here. Not because that we're administering it to healthy people. That's always what we do. That's how vaccines work. That's why they have to be incredibly safe. But the reason the COVID vaccine is different from all the others is that the benefit to harm ratio is different. So there have been a lot of side effects that we didn't know about before actually pushing this onto the world. Some of those very common ones are blood clots and thromboembolism, and that can be quite severe. Then there's myocarditis, and these are the most famous ones. But then there are other types of symptoms that are more common that I see a lot of people. A lot of people have come to me post-vaccination for side effects such as like tiredness, inability to use their arm as they could before, sudden deafness, tinnitus, and these kinds of things. So the side effects are severe and not negligible. Still, if you zoom out, it might be so that the COVID vaccine reduced morbidity and mortality in a way that we can actually say it was possibly worth it. But I am not one to argue that. I can see how that argument can be made, but I'm agnostic here. I find it difficult to argue for a case where this was not morally and ethically dubious.
Mm-hmm. And,
yeah.
and to bring it back to psilocybin and palliative care, and that feeling of, like you said, not being afraid of death, right?
Yes.
But being overcome with sadness. And for people out there, and I know many, anecdotally, many people that friends, close friends or family have suffered post vaccination and have developed what's being colloquially termed as, turbo cancer, and have passed away or are in the process of. The idea now that you suggest that psilocybin could be used to ease that person's pain is so worth exploring. Like that
100%.
It's just, and not only that, but for the family members as well, because not only are they going to be overcome with sadness, but there's going to be some that are going to be overcome with pure anger because they perhaps told them, please don't take this just in case,
Yeah. And the indications for psychedelics can be broadened beyond palliative care. That is where I see them being used, where the biggest need is. But that is probably not where they're going to emerge first in modern medicine. We are first going to see them in psychiatry because we have fantastic, good data from good studies showing that just a single session, a single psychedelic therapy session can treat otherwise treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, OCD, and PTSD. We have no medicine, no therapy that come close to how effective psychedelics are at treating these conditions. And that is where most of the research is being done now. And I believe that we are going to see them for PTSD and depression first, and addiction as well. I mean, they are perfect in combating addiction. People have had like decades, have a history of a decade-long opioid or alcohol addiction or tobacco addiction, can go into this experience and come out of it and no longer have any need for alcohol or tobacco. Because here's the thing, Daniel, like what people everything that you know about addiction is wrong. Everything that you know about addiction is wrong. People perceive addiction as like a thing where the chemical has these hooks that hijack your reward system. That is not how it works. That is the conventional view of how addiction developed. That is not how it works. Like, I saw you had a beer. Are you addicted to alcohol? You're not. You're not addicted to alcohol just because you're okay, mate.
No, but it's interesting. Let's stick on this point because again, Kaysen and I spent a lot of time talking about this because we did this in person and on the podcast. Yeah. He told me about how he used to be addicted to alcohol, and he's sitting there in front of me, and we're sharing a beer together.
Yeah,
but like with the beer, like, you know, how am I supposed to react to this? You know, where's your fucking sponsor, Case? And he's like, no, I've got it under control, and I'm like, right, okay, so what is it then? What's that fine? What's the blurred definition?
Yeah, thank you for that question.
You know, addicted to alcohol or someone who's an addict? Because yeah, it's 6 o'clock here. Well, it's now 7:30, but I sit down, I have this conversation with you, and at the end of the day, I just like to have a beer and get into conversation. Or, you know, it's a cultural thing as well. You'd have saucisson here in France, and you do the same. It's everywhere. It's the same thing.
Yep.
But does that mean I'm addicted to alcohol between the hours of like 6 and 8 o'clock?
No.
Or does that discredit alcoholism, which is an awful destroying disease? But, you know, yeah, so I would love to know, and I'm sure many people listening who enjoy a glass of wine and then feel guilty after it would like to know, you know, what is going on? What is that?
Let's take an even more extreme example.
Right.
Most people who use heroin, who smoke heroin, they're not addicted to it. Most people who do are not addicted to it. And here's the thing. The reason we become addicted is not because of the chemical. The reason we become addicted is because we have some sort of wound that needs healing. And this is very evident if you look at how addiction actually develops. There's a great experiment to highlight this point. Are you aware of Rat Park? So Rat Park is one of the greatest experiments ever made, I think. So you had these rats in a cage in a lab where the scientists gave them 2 water bottles, one with pure water, the other one with water mixed with opioids. And all of the rats tried both, and then they solely went to the one with the opioids, and they drank themselves to death. Then there was this smart guy who realized that, hold on a minute, could we try this in a different context? These rats are constantly stressed. They don't have friends, they don't have access to sex, they don't have access to food or toys, and there are these large beings going around and lifting them in their tail and doing research on them. Can we just build Rat Park instead, where they have friends, access to sex and food and toys, and there are no fluorescent lights and no scientists walking around in white coats? All of the rats tried both bottles. None of the rats ever went back to opioids. They were perfectly content with just drinking water. And then because they didn't have a social, emotional prison that they needed to escape. And there's an even bigger experiment on people. And it is the Vietnam War. When we sent teenagers, 18 and 19-year-olds into Vietnam at a time when Americans had no idea what a Vietnamese person was. They were very afraid. They went into a place that they had no idea what it was. They were homesick. They didn't want to be there, and they were sent there to die. A lot of these young men started to use heroin. They started to inject heroin because it was very prevalent there.
And I don't want to like belabor that point, but they were sent there when their birthdays were picked out of a hat.
Yes.
On live television. This
right.
is how fucking sick that
right.
whole escapade was.
Yeah, it was a very strange and horrible war. So when heroin. So when they were going to come back to the States, a lot of people were afraid that they were going to have like an army of heroin addicts coming back. But what was shown was that those who had something to come back to, they never used heroin again. They stopped cold turkey. So addiction is not about the chemical hooks. It is about your social and emotional prison. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. When you have connection with other people, with yourself, with nature, with cosmos, you don't need to use substances to heal your wounds anymore. So that is also how psychedelics treat addiction. Because when they go into that psychedelic experience, they experience connection, possibly for the first time in their life. They unlock something where they now are able to have connection with themselves, with nature, with other people. People know that drinking too much alcohol is bad for you. People know that using too much tobacco is bad for you. We can intellectualize this. So when we have that psychedelic experience, we internalize that experience in a very different way. So the reason psychedelics are so effective in treating depression and addiction and PTSD and OCD is not because of the chemical substance. It is because of the experience that they're having. And that is a radical different mechanism of action compared to all the conventional drugs that I prescribe to my patients, for example. Like when I prescribe blood pressure medication, that it contains a chemical that produces a physiological change that lowers your blood pressure. That's how that works. Psychedelics are a completely different beast. They work not because they have a chemical property that produces a physiological effect. They have that quality to them as well. They produce or they stimulate neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons in the brain, so they can actually make the brain younger and healthier in that sense. But that's not how they treat these horrible diseases. The way they treat disease is by offering a new kind of experience so that people are again able to have connection. And when they have connection, addiction becomes or substances to cope or whatever the reason they're using them to escape their emotional and social prisons, it becomes inconsequential.
Would this have an effect on suicide rates as well, do you think?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because the thing with suicides is that most suicides are acts of impulse. They happen in the moment. Like a lot of people seek medical attention because they're afraid that they're going to kill themselves, not because like most suicides don't happen because people want to kill themselves. It's not this planned thing that they're going on and then they decide on a date and they write a letter and then they hang themselves. That's a very few cases. Most cases are people they are vulnerable and they are feeling the urge to kill themselves, and in one instant they're not going to be able to stop themselves, but they don't want to die necessarily. So suicide is a very complex condition, or being suicidal is a very complex condition. So, but most of people who experience being suicidal, they also suffer from addiction, depression, and maybe even OCD and PTSD, because what we're beginning to realize, like it sounds kind of weird that psychedelics would be this panacea curing all of these diseases. But the thing is, we're beginning to think that these conditions may not be different conditions, different illnesses. Right. They may be different symptoms of the same kind of brain, a rigid brain, a brain stuck in loops of rumination, inflexible thinking. And psychedelics cure that. So they get to the root cause of a ton of these psychiatric illnesses. And that is why they're so effective, because they actually target the root cause, as opposed to all of our other medications and treatments, which are basically medical whack-a-mole. We're reactive. We're not proactive. We're not targeting the root cause. But psychedelics actually target the root cause. And that is the next paradigm.
It's like a system reboot to the mind. Like
it is. You reboot the mind.
Rob Brinded would use that kind of analogy, you know, to like running an antivirus kind of software through your brain, clearing all of that shit out and resetting it, debugging it, and setting you back up. So you're not having those dark thoughts anymore and the suicidal thoughts. And it's interesting as well when you talking about palliative care and euthanasia. If someone were to take like psilocybin, would that then set them up for the eventual outcome, and they wouldn't seek that help, that euthanasia? Or have you been down that rabbit hole of thought?
The thing with euthanasia is most doctors are for euthanasia. It's a political hurdle to get there. And the thing is, here in Sweden, it's very illegal, but we still practice it. We practice it in the sense that we can offer treatments such as pain relief, that where a side effect is death. But that is not why we prescribe it. We prescribe the medication to relieve pain, and then a side effect of that is acceptable, being death. So that is a way to get around euthanasia, and that is practiced. But here's the thing with the euthanasia. Even if you are in a state where your body is causing you so much pain, physical pain, that you no longer have the desire to continue this human experience, you should have the option to opt out. And that should be done very, very carefully in a setting that is adapted for this. So it shouldn't be, euthanasia should be accessible, but not easy to get. You have to go through at least 2 or 3 doctors and some therapy, and just make sure that this is the right path. But in my opinion, there are a few things that should be optional, that are going to be optional in the next paradigm of modern medicine. And those things are death. And now I'm not just talking about enduring an illness. I'm also talking about not dying at all. We are entering a new paradigm in modern medicine where we are going to be targeting age as a disease. We are reclassifying the drivers of age as a multitude of different diseases. And we are going to be targeting them instead of the consequences of the aging cells. So as I said, we are currently playing a game of medical whack-a-mole, where we let the diseases manifest instead of going at the root cause, which is most of the time the aging cells. And we are this is a field biogerontology, it's called, which is attracting a lot of resources and people. And that is where we're going next. Psychedelics is one of those medicines for psychiatry, targeting the root cause. In somatic medicine, where I'm at, we are going to be targeting the hallmarks of aging. So this at the cellular level, there are a few processes that go awry and produce age. So as we age chronologically, there's a bigger and bigger risk of developing these cellular diseases. And we are going to be targeting them instead of the diseases they produce. So we're going one level beyond where we are now, targeting the actual root cause. We have begun doing this in some fields. Like, for example, like most people are aware of a few of the hallmarks of aging, like telomere attrition is one, where for every time a cell divides, a bit of the telomeres is shortened. So like chromosomes, when they fold up, they look like these X's, and at the end of that there's a little buffer zone called the telomeres, and that is cleaved off every time the cell divides. And when the telomeres are too short, or when they have acquired too much damage, the cell begins to signal to say, hey, telomeres are short, and or there's a lot of damage here, come and pick me up. It signals to the immune system, and it undergoes apoptosis, and it dies, and this immune system comes and picks it up. So that's one thing. So we need to actually prevent telomere shortening without causing cancer. So we have medicines to prolong telomeres, but then the side effect is cancer. So we can choose between life and cancer, basically. But the thing is, we can choose life and prevent cancer. Then there are 8 or 9 other hallmarks of aging, and one that we have begun targeting already is the garbage theory of aging, which is when in the cell you have to envisage the cell as a society that has factories that have energy producing stations, garbage stations, and they have all these same functions as we do in a society, basically. And then there are the lysosomes, which are the garbage stations, and they have about 60 enzymes in them that pick up these lysosomes. They pick up debris and misfolded proteins, and then they break them down. But then then sometimes there are proteins that are very difficult to break down, and over time those proteins will accumulate and fill up the entire cell. So in the retina, there's a region called the macula at the back of the eye where we see, and the macula is a small area that is the most highly dense with the photoreceptors. And those photoreceptors, the cells of that area, they can start to accumulate a protein, like I think it's called PGE2 or something like that. And this protein is very, like, the enzymes that they use the crowbars, they try to break it up, but it's difficult. So that drives aging. Like the accumulation of that protein, accumulation of garbage drives aging, and it causes macular degeneration, which is a common term is age blindness. So one of the reasons that we lose our eyesight is because of macular degeneration, and that is because the cells in the retina are aging. But we can actually target that now with an injection in the eye with a medicine called Lysoclear that actually helps the lysosome break down these proteins. So when I'm talking about longevity medicine, I'm not talking about taking a pill and then staying young. I'm talking about very specific diseases in specific organs. but targeting the actual aging rather than the disease. So when we target the disease, when it's already manifest, that is symptomatic treatment. And we become pretty good at that. But it's not where we need to be. We need to actually target the root cause. And this is eventually going to lead to us becoming staying basically young as a 25-year-old for hundreds or thousands of years. That is the end stage of this paradigm of medicine. Like this is going to be the third paradigm of medicine. In the first paradigm, we when we were hunter-gatherers and farmers, we had 4 big killers: childbirth, infection, trauma, and starvation. We solved these by becoming rich, creating modern society, modern medicine, and discovering antibiotics. So now instead we're in the second paradigm, where we have 4 new big killers. We have diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease, and cancer. And we don't have cure for these diseases because we are playing medical whack-a-mole. We are reactive. We're treating the symptoms of these illnesses. But even if we could cure all cancers or all cardiovascular diseases, you would still die 2 years later because you're old and frail, and you would contract pneumonia, or you would get dementia instead, neurodegenerative disease. Like what we have to do is not spend all of our resources on the 95-year-old who has Alzheimer's disease and have had a stroke and myocardial infarction, and treat the symptoms after those diseases. What we need to do is realize that regardless of our chronological age, we still have the same DNA blueprint that we can use to code for a 25-year-old. There is nothing in the 95-year-old that disallows us from producing the same person as a 25-year-old. The reason that person looks like a 95-year-old by today's standards is because of cellular diseases, the 9 hallmarks of aging, epigenetic alterations. But we're beginning to target these cellular diseases so that we don't have to symptomatically treat age-related illnesses, but instead we can prevent them before they ever occur. And that is a much, much better use of resources. And we will avoid a lot of morbidity and mortality. And we ultimately, we will become an ageless species. That is the next paradigm.
Wow. Have you been down the niacin rabbit hole?
I mean, I practice some longevity myself. I haven't, just to answer your question, I've looked at niacin, but I don't use it. I'm not opposed to it by any means, but things that I use personally, a lot of people ask me what I do to prevent, to slow down aging. Right now, we don't have a lot of medicines to biogerontology or longevity medicine. We're not there yet that we have actual medicines to prescribe to the average population to slow down aging or even prevent it. But we do know that age is malleable. It goes back and forth. So in the future, I see us as we will age to a certain age, and we will on a regular basis scan our age. We have very, very good parameters for scanning age biologically now, such as DNA methylation and so on. It's a very good biological clock. So we will, akin to how a diabetic measures their blood glucose, we will be able to measure our biological age. And then we may have guidelines that say that maybe you shouldn't be like above the age of 55 for too long. maybe when you reach the age of 65 or so, maybe it's time to start reversing aging, and you'll go in for a treatment and you'll start reverse aging. But I think that most people, when this has become accessible, that we will start preventing age even before we reach 30, so that we always stay basically below 25. And people ask me almost on a daily basis what I do. And I would say that the most controversial thing I do is that I use metformin, which is diabetes medicine. I don't have diabetes, but one of the best technologies that we have to prevent aging as it is now is to control our glucose, our blood glucose. So I use a diabetes medicine for that. I also use hypertension medicine. I don't have hypertension. I don't have high blood pressure, but I still use medication for that. And I also use statins to lower blood lipids. And those are the prescription medications that I use. Besides that, I use creatine, which is good for muscular health and mental health. And besides that, it's very important. Like if there's just one thing that you should do for your longevity, is stop smoking. If you do that, just stop smoking. That's the worst thing you can do for preventing aging. But then you need to exercise, you need to sleep, you need to, and other things that are more like intangible are things like you should probably have a garden, you should probably have a partner, you probably shouldn't isolate. These things are also very clearly bad for they don't really, if you don't have a garden, if you don't have a spouse, if you don't sleep well, if you don't exercise, you are going to live a shorter life.
And yeah, stop eating all the shit, all the refined sugars and all of that crap that is pushed on us as cheap food. And yeah, anyway, oh man, well, that's fascinating. I am fully down the niacin rabbit hole. I think
interesting. I want to hear more what your take is on that.
Yeah, I'll send you the I've got a 4-hour podcast with Dr. Dimitri Katz about it, which goes way too deep for my non-medical mind. But the way I try and explain it to noobs is that it's just vitamin B3 in its purest form. And when you take it, you get this effect of an all-over body flush. So it would feel like, I don't know, like a mild sunburn, maybe. You will go red and you might itch in a few places. And the way that I can summarize what's going on in the body is that all of the capillaries are being opened up, and the blood flow is being what's the word I'm looking for here?
You increase perfusion to every organ.
Right. It just Dimitri would hate me with this explanation because he goes into ATP and this is he'll go down to the cellular level like you do. But just a real basic example, I used to have Raynaud's syndrome, whereby, for those listening that don't know, that one or two of my fingers on each one of my hands, or one or two of my toes, would go completely white during the colder months. And I've suffered with this for the last 5 to 10 years, goodness knows how long. And I noticed, without even realizing, really, after about 3 months of taking niacin through December, January, February, that all of a sudden that was gone. I do not suffer from that anymore. And weirdly enough, another thing that I noticed after taking it, directly after taking it, I get the flush, not all the time now, because you do build up a bit of a resistance to that. But my vision, and I have good vision, I don't have to wear glasses. Still at the age of 47, my vision's still fine, but it gets so clear directly after taking niacin. So, which is interesting to what you were saying about the retinal protein buildup. And I just wonder now, having listened to you talking about that, that I wonder if that is working in some kind of level where it's just clearing all of that garbage out there. And Dimitri would also talk about this at the neurological level and how it can open up and fire off the synapses in the brain. And he's seen, I mean, well, there's a book back here behind me, Niacin, the Real Story, written by Dr. Abraham Hoffer, and he talks about the use of it for addiction. And in fact, that was first brought up in Alcoholics Anonymous, where it was first used, like pure niacin, to just like switch that off, and also used for PTSD. And it's really worth anybody's time going down that rabbit hole. I have a little side Telegram group, Signal group, if you're interested in joining, because everyone's in there, everyone's a maxi, everyone's going down this rabbit hole. And
please invite me.
Share. Sorry.
Please invite me. I would love to.
Yeah, sure. And they're all sharing their experiences. And just today, an update for somebody is like, "Yo, this has cured my varicose veins. Like this is freaking crazy. Like my calves used to be popping, but like, yeah." And then another one's like, "Yeah, I noticed that on my mother-in-law as well, and she's now converted." So it's a really interesting little, what Bitcoiners are like. You get pulled into all these different realms and rabbit holes, and here we have been sitting here for 2 hours talking about stuff. I don't think we've mentioned Bitcoin once, man.
The thing is, what I want to be, what I would love to see from Bitcoiners is, like, Bitcoiners are natural critical thinkers, but for some reason, anecdotal evidence weighs very heavily in the Bitcoin community, and I'm not sure why. Anecdotal evidence is the weakest form of evidence. It is not something that we should neglect. Anecdotal evidence is very, very important, but it does not. It's not in the same ballpark as randomized controlled trials, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials. So when I research like the medications that I use for longevity, I take some time to actually read the actual literature on PubMed on these compounds like I select a few studies that are relevant to my cause, and then I make a uninformed decision. So I have begun down that route for quite a few supplements and medications now. I have not done that with niacin yet, but I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. I've recently concluded my research on NMN and resveratrol, popularized by biogerontologist David Sinclair, and I've come to the conclusion: yes, but not now, not for me now. We need more research.
Interesting.
Because they are incredibly expensive, and if you're going to be
there seems to be a lot of shills in that realm.
Yes, there are,
and some very interested venture capitalists that are looking for exits rather than results. They're the two red flags that I see when, especially when it comes to David Sinclair's work and others around that arena. But man, listen, we're gonna have to wrap it up. As much as I'd love to start, getting into another little rabbit hole here, because I've got to run upstairs for dinner. All right, let's end it on a Bitcoin note. If you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
For those of you just listening, I'm thinking. Your podcast is still on. Don't worry. That's a good question. I want to give a good answer. While I'm thinking, I can say I just saw on Twitter that Louis C.K. has been orange pilled. which is fun. I very much like that he's now a Bitcoin. He's exploring like Bitcoin maximalism and seeing what it's all about, and that made me very happy to see. Like who would I on a personal level see orange pilled? That would just be my family, because those are the people that I care most about. So that's on a personal level. But then if I were to zoom out and see where it would have the most impact, ultimately, Honey Badger doesn't care. Like the whole thing with the ETFs and stuff. That, I mean, that's a significant milestone, but it's like it doesn't ultimately matter. It's a great milestone because we have to go through these things. Banks are going to hold Bitcoin. That is inevitable. But I would really like to see like our big tech entrepreneurs be orange pilled. I think that would be significant, because that would. I mean, Jack Dorsey is obviously orange pilled, but I would love to see other people who have the resources and the capacity to actually build infrastructure in a very meaningful way, start to integrate Bitcoin into their businesses. Elon Musk is an obvious candidate. Yeah. So I'll have to say my family and Elon Musk.
All right, man. Well, it doesn't matter what you say because there's no wrong answer, but it's lovely to see you go through that thought process live. And thank you so much for for everything you're doing in the Bitcoin space. I mean, you've made some incredible videos. I know you work very closely with Guy and Knut, and have released a lot of stuff with those guys. Your book is incredible. Go to KONSENSUS Network. People go and pick that up, and read through it, and come and meet Ioni in person, because you're going to be hanging around the KONSENSUS booth and signing books. You're doing that in Riga and in Prague. What do you have any other signing sessions coming up?
Yes. I'm going to Adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador in November, and then Madeira in March.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. So I'll see you there. So yeah, people, please read Abundance Through Scarcity. Nobody regrets reading Abundance Through Scarcity. It's a gem, if I can say so myself. I'm very, very proud to have my name on that book. Do read it.
Yeah.
And come and say hi whenever you see me. I would be very happy to hear your story. That's why we're here. I want to connect with people.
Hyperconnectivity.
Yes.
There you go. All the way back to the beginning. Look at that. Look what we did. The full 360.
The circular composition is good.
All right, brother. Well, thank you so much. And we'll have more conversations. Have a great evening. And speak again soon.
Thank you.